So here's the code from the previous example, and there were these three constructors for my rectangle type, and this is the case where I am drawing my rectangle. I'm representing it by two different xy coordinate pairs in space, the lower left corner and the upper left corner, and I'm representing the lower left corner and the upper left corner by an object of type point. And in these constructors, you provide me, for example, the coordinates of each point, and I just set them. And I noticed at the end of the last video this is a bit weird, and the purpose of the exercise in this video is to fix a compile error that I've created in the meantime. In the meantime, what I've done is I've modified the point class so that you cannot modify its members. Instead, you are only allowed to set the x and y coordinates of a point when you construct it. So once the point object has been constructed, you may not modify it ever again. We saw this variant of the point class in a previous video. So, and there's reasons this is a valuable thing to do. The key thing here is that now, when I'm constructing my rectangles, I need to find some other way of setting the x and y coordinates of my point objects. I can retrieve the x and y coordinates if I want them, but I can't modify them. I've already modified the class in cases where it needs to get the x or y coordinates to call getx and gety, because I suspect that isn't really the salient part of this video for any of you. But I need to modify the constructors. So in the last video, we saw that as of the beginning of a constructor, so let's say line number 50, as of line 50, both of the members, lower left and upper right, have already been constructed, because I wouldn't be allowed to use them until after they've been constructed. But that's a bit of a problem for us, because if they've already been constructed, how can I construct them here? I certainly can't write this, because I'm not allowed to modify .x and .y. So what do? I have to dictate how they get constructed. I want to construct lower left to contain this x coordinate and this y coordinate. I want to construct upper right to contain this x coordinate and this y coordinate. But I know that as of line 50, the constructor for both members has already been run. And the solution is we do have this option that came up last week of dictating how the member variables get initialized, and I have to use that. It's the only way to dictate how they are brought into the world. Otherwise, what I'm doing on line 52 amounts to modifying existing data. It's already been constructed. I'm not allowed to construct it again. And so I can't do something similar to this because I'm not allowed just to modify .x and .y. So the syntax we use, recall from last week, is before the opening curly bracket for the constructor, I put a colon after the signature, after the list of parameters, and then before the opening curly bracket, I put in a list of constructor calls. So I say lower left, and then I give the constructor call for lower left. In this case, the lower left point should be constructed with LLX as its x coordinate and LLY as its y coordinate. And then I do a comma-separated list of other things I want to initialize. So upper right gets initialized with its constructor called URX and URY. And as we saw in the previous video, without putting this notation, of course, the point objects have to be constructed somehow, but if I don't give the compiler any advice on which constructor to call, it will automatically try and call the default constructor. It has to call some constructor, so it calls the default one. Here, I'm saying explicitly, please call the constructor that takes two arguments. And in so doing, I can get rid of this. Instead, I'm saying initialize lower left with a constructor call that takes this and this, and then initialize upper right, taking this and this. I'll do the same thing in the other constructors. So here in the default constructor, I'm initializing lower left to be 0 and 0, although I could just call the default constructor here. That would be fine. 0 and 0. And I'm initializing upper right to also be 0 and 0. Okay, and then I can get rid of this. All right, and then down here in this constructor, let's see. So I'm going to do lower left will be 0 and 0 as per the directions on line 60, and upper right will be initial width and initial height. There we go. So here I have dictated which constructor for my members gets called by indicating them in this list of initializers that I can provide after the constructor's signature, but before the constructor's code itself begins running. Because the code for the constructor is just regular member function code. And by the time I enter a member function, all the members need to exist because I might want to use them. So we'll see whether that, I guess I never showed off the hideous compile errors that you get if you tried it otherwise, but take my word for it, we know that we can't can't access private data, it would have been a problem. And if I run this, we can observe that, I'll just show the huge list of output. We can see that I call my width height constructor, but all of my point constructors are now the one that takes x and y coordinates, the one that takes 2 arguments. That would be this. So it is now delegating the point construction to this constructor because I've made the explicit request that it do so. Now we still haven't gotten to that point I made at the end of the previous video, which is these 2 constructors do still seem a little bit too similar. It would be sort of nice if I had a way, for example, if I didn't want to have to keep copying and pasting this condition, it would be sort of nice if I had a way of combining them together somehow. And we'll get to that. That's the topic for next video.